All right. Let's check it again. Facebook will be down. YouTube is up. Looks like Rumble is up. Yep. Looks like AAR is back up. The only one off is Facebook. That's going to require a new setup, and I'm not really worried about that one.
Yeah, YouTube's up.
I don't know if X is back up or not because it looks like it's playing the logo.
Hey, it's Andy Hoosier, the voice of reason on KQAM, Wichita's Big Talker, and you're tuned into the Armed American
Yeah, it's up just by my testing.
Self, Mark Walters.
Looks like we've got everything back up and running for you guys, everything but Facebook anyway, but looks like we're back at you with audio and video and all that fun stuff, and well, that's what happens. Sometimes it just works that way. Hey guys, please make it a point to visit all of Armed American Radio's great partners and sponsors. You can find all of them at armedamericanradio.com, armedamericanradio.com. You know, we're talking about self-defense cases, coincidentally, and of course, our newest sponsor is Attorneys on Retainer, attorneysonretainer.com, attorneysonretainer.com. And if you visit over there, you can just use the portal right at armedamericanradio.com to make it easy. We direct you right where you need to go. Either way, you can just visit them. Use the AAR promo code, and you're going to save $35, I believe, right off the top of your fee. And you're going to get a great deal over there. And guess what? You're going to have an attorney on retainer in a self-defense situation. God forbid if you need one, you will have one, an entire law firm who does nothing but support you in self-defense cases only. It's the only thing they do. I'll be broadcasting out there with Mark Victor, the founder of Attorneys on Retainer, from Phoenix, Arizona at the AM 980, the Patriot Studios. We love you guys out there in Phoenix. We'll be out there on the 5th of June. We'll be broadcasting on the 5th. Be out there on the 4th and broadcasting on the 5th of June with Attorneys on Retainer. Make sure to check them out. Take advantage of that discount and get yourself a team of attorneys that has your back. The moment you sign up, you've got an attorney on retainer for literal chump change. It's the only thing they do. And you can find the rest of our great partners, all of them, at armedamericanradio.com. Andy Hoosier, the voice of reason, welcome back in, my brother.
Yes, sir.
All right, let's keep going with some of these stories because these cases are fascinating. You know, that whole we could do an entire hour on the I'm doing illegal stuff. So is it really self-defense? Yeah, I mean those are very complex cases, and it's impossible to answer that question because each individual case has so many complexities to it. So we won't even bother. But now a classic case of self-defense, and we've got tons of these, but I'll point to one that happened on February 27th in Corpus Christi, Texas, when a homeowner shot an intruder who attempted to break into their home in the middle of the night, early hours, 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning. Police responded to the scene, and the incident was reported as an absolute clear case of self-defense, literally on the spot by the cops, with the homeowner protecting their property and safety and security of not only the homeowner himself, but family as well. You know, and a talking point to a story like that is pretty easy to come up with because what it does is it underscores the role of your ability to use a firearm in home defense. And this is, sadly, guys, a common scenario where your having a gun, Andy, proves critical to your survival. Where if you didn't have it, you likely would not have survived the incident. So I don't know how anybody could ever argue against having a firearm in the home in a situation like that, Andy, but there are people out there that do. Remarkably.
Yeah, and that's why conveniently the media does not talk about these stories, these good cases of good guys with guns stop bad guy with gun, and they save their own life, they save the life of their family, they save the life of their neighbor, whoever it may be, anybody surrounding them in the grocery store, wherever this incident may happen, in a shoe store for crying out loud, and they end up stopping a bad guy. That's why it's so important when you read these kinds of stories. It's that reminder to where everybody that's listening to it, even if they don't have a firearm right now, they think, gee, you know what? Maybe the laws are really tough in my area. Maybe it's hard to get it. I don't really want to go through the process of going through the, the screening, the red flags, all this other garbage. But at the same time, having this firearm, even though it's frowned upon in my community, God forbid if something happened here, look at all of these cases to where those people may not be with us right now at this moment if they did not have a firearm with them. And obviously we don't know when something like that's going to happen. And God forbid if that happens anywhere near me, I could be completely vulnerable. And so many people that have talked about trauma and life experiences and abuse and all this other garbage that they've gone through. If they had a means to protect themselves, they would have a completely different scenario and story and outlook on the world right now. This is the importance of why there's no argument. There's no argument out there that could say, hey, you walking around without any type of self-defense or protection is way better for you than if you actually had these things. No one can make that case, especially when you read these stories like you do all the time.
But they try. They try. The anti-gunners try.
They try to use
Go ahead.
They try to use the hypothetical of like, if there's people that are in a public area and one starts shooting to defend from a bad guy, no one else knows what's going on. They pull their gun, they start shooting at the other person that's using it for defense, and then there's a major shootout, and we're complete. Like they act and they treat us like we're complete imbeciles and that we are completely stupid and unaware of our entire surroundings. And most people that carry firearms, and I say most because there are the few idiots out there that don't have any training or have no idea what they're doing. Of course they're there, but the vast majority of people that carry a firearm are well aware of their surroundings and know that if, God forbid, something is happening, they know what to look for instead of just pulling their firearm out and just randomly shooting. But Democrats and those that don't like guns, they don't understand that. So they come up with this hypothetical scenario of anarchy where there's a major shootout and 50 people die in a public area because that everyone's carrying a gun and doesn't know what's going on.
Yeah, and there's a couple questions involved in a home invasion. Now, I wish I had the audio of Greg. I should have asked you to bring this up, but it's going back a ways. But there was, I believe, a Moms Demand Action woman who was asked about whether or not you should be able to use a gun in self-defense in your home during a home invasion. She flat out said no, it should be murder. And you have to wonder what goes through this person's mind, and you have to wonder what bubble have you lived in. And
exactly.
You go back to the Mike Dukakis thing from years ago. Would you want the death penalty if your wife were physically sexually assaulted? And he said no. Well, that can pretty much cost him an election. That and the goofy Snoopy in the tank thing. But stupid answers because everybody understands we have a right to protect ourselves. Everybody, you would think. But there are a lot of bleeding hearts out there that believe it's murder. Yeah, there are people sitting in prisons in Great Britain right now because they used a gun to defend themselves against an armed intruder in their own home, and they fired and shot and killed him, and they're the ones in jail. Andy, it happens. As bizarre as that is, to the average thinker out there, there are people in this country that feel the same way. Sadly, right?
Well, and there's two reasons why, and I'll tell you, there's two reasons why they would be against that, and to literally say that your property or your life is not more valuable than somebody else's if they try to come and take it, is because number one, they've never gone through an experience like that, so they don't know what it's like at that time because they
True.
see it as a theoretical mindset. It's never going to happen to me. I live in this beautiful community. I live in this safety net mindset.
Not
They
gonna
truly
happen
think
to
that
me. I live
yeah,
behind
it
a
will
gate,
never
baby.
happen to me. Exactly. And number two, we also live in a society today where victimhood is a status symbol. And if something does happen to me and I survive through it, I am now a victim. And if you go through it, you are a victim, just like you are is someone of a certain skin color or a certain sexual orientation or transgender or whatever. Just like that, we are now in a victimhood society where it is cool to be a victim. So I would rather be vulnerable and something happened to me to where I can be like, oh, it happened to me and now I'm a victim of society. So you should you should look up to me and you should thank me and parade me around, as opposed to I'm not going to be in that situation and you're not going to let that happen to me. So I will put a stop to it because I'm going to take personal responsibility. So between never having it happen before, never thinking it could happen, and loving the idea of being a victim, of course you're going to get these people that just think that how dare you could ever carry a firearm and harm somebody else if they try to break into your house.
Until they become a victim and decide, what was I thinking?
But then it's too late.
Time to have
That's
a gun.
it.
But hopefully it's not. But yeah, that's sadly
Hopefully it's not.
Sadly that happens. All too
It's
often
it's
that
kind of the
happens.
same story of an atheist that goes around never believing in God until they get in a car accident and they fly through their windshield. What's the thing that goes through their mind at that moment?
Yeah.
Oh dear God. Like, I mean, that's exactly what's going on here as well. The atheist can be as anti-God or atheist as they believe until that moment of death creeps upon them and their life flashes before their eyes. And all of a sudden now they're a firm believer because they know something else is there.
Yeah, it's a great point. Now, ladies and gentlemen, when we come back from the break, we're going to go to two instances that always raise questions, but always fun to talk about. Road rage. Road rage is fascinating for a lot of different reasons. Road rage itself is fascinating.
Don't call me out like that, bro.
Road rage is just fascinating in and of itself, but when it escalates to deadly force, boy, there's a lot going on in road rage cases. Always, it's really hard sometimes to find out who the perp is. But then we're gonna go to a Louisville, Kentucky example of that. Then we're gonna go to a Brentwood, Tennessee, from 2025. These are all 2025 recent cases over the past 5 months, when a neighbor intervened in a violent attack. So you got a third party going on here. Always fun to talk about. We're going to wrap this hour up with Andy Hoosier, the voice of reason, KQAM, Wichita's Big Talker. We love you guys. Back with Andy. Two more self-defense stories right after this. All right, guys, if you moved to another platform, if you want to watch on X, just go ahead and refresh it. Looks like we're good over there. And I think that's all solid. That's what production's telling me anyway. So there you go. Thanks for your patience. For those watchers, we'll call you watchers. We love you guys.
Hi, it's Mike Gallagher wanting to let you know that the crew of the Desperado Sport Fish in Virginia Beach, Virginia supports Armed American Radio and the Second Amendment, and I'm right there with them. Now back to Mark Walters.
Yes, indeed. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Car Firearms Group Studios lit up for you on a Memorial Day holiday weekend. Hope you're enjoying your time off, but remember why we have the time off. Don't forget that. Many, many people have sacrificed immensely and given their lives so that we can talk about these things on the nation's airwaves on hundreds of radio stations and have other people not like what we talk about. Believe it or not, they don't like us talking about these things for some reason, but that's okay. That's why we do it. That's why we do it every single day, 6 days a week. Try to take that Saturday off, and it kind of never works that way. But nonetheless, I hope you're enjoying your time with your family, and I hope you're looking forward to a day off tomorrow if you should be lucky enough to have one. Some don't, and I get that, but if you do, I hope you enjoy it and you enjoy it safely. Mark Walters here with you in the Car Firearms Group Studios. 6-hour mic lit up. On-air lights are on here at the Patriot Mobile Command Center. Get yourself a month free at patriotmobile.com. This phone right here is a Patriot Mobile activated phone. You can do the same thing. Visit patriotmobile.com/AAR, patriotmobile.com/AAR, and get that free month of activation. Don't forget ammosquared.com, ammosquared.com. Make sure to check out ammosquared.com. It's a 401k for all of your ammo needs. They supply it. They keep it. When you want it, tell them to ship it. It's simply a click of a mouse. It's that simple. I've got several thousand rounds now. You can do the same thing. And let's get going. You can find them all, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, including mypillow.com. Heaven's Harvest, by the way, emergency food, 40% off. Get it before that's gone over the weekend, okay? 40% off is one of the biggest deals I've ever seen over there, and I can promise you, like me, you will sleep better at night knowing that you have that emergency stash in your possession. Andy Hoosier, the voice of reason. Welcome back, my brother.
Yeah, buddy.
All right, so road rage, man. Road rage is scary stuff. And when I was teaching my kids how to drive, I was very mindful to talk to them about it. You know, basic advice. If somebody's ever hassling you, first off, never come to your home. Don't drive them to your home. Drive them to a police station if you can. Drive them to a fire station if you can. Flag somebody down if you can. Get on the phone with 911. You can do it hands-free from your phone. It's easy to do. If you find yourself in a dark, secluded place and some lunatic scumbag bothering you, always put that phone on 911, leave it open, do your level best to get out of there. But if you have to defend your life, don't forget, guys, you're in a 3,000-pound bullet. Use it if you have to, and use it with its full force. But every road rage incident, Andy, is different. And I think anybody that's driven a car or drives a car has either witnessed it or been involved in it. And some of us, let's be honest, guys, have been on both sides of it, okay? Stay away from it at all costs. That's just the best advice. But you had a case in February of this year where a road rage incident in Louisville, Kentucky escalated when an aggressor threatened a driver with a weapon. Here's the key operative word. An aggressor threatened a driver with a weapon. The victim, who was a concealed carry permit holder, shot that attacker in self-defense in Louisville. And it ended the confrontation, obviously. But this is another story that picked up a lot of social media talk because talking about the role of using a firearm in de-escalating life-threatening situations while on the road. And these things unfold very quickly, Andy. I had it happen to me in 2002. It wasn't a road rage per se, but it appeared to be an attempted carjacking. I've talked about it just innumerable times on the radio over the years. It was the first story in my first book, Lessons from Armed America. Thankfully, I had a firearm. Because I had a firearm, I am convinced that's why I went home to my 2-week-old daughter at the time and to my young wife. And because I lived, my son was subsequently born, all because I had a gun. It could very easily have turned out the wrong way. There were 2 attackers. Andy Hoosier, the voice of reason. These are scary situations, no doubt. But guys, for the most part, you're going to know, Andy, whether or not it's time, right?
Well, I mean, yeah, especially with road rage, you're going to have that feeling. I mean, look, at that moment, we have to recognize, and this is very hard to do for a lot of individuals, but we have to recognize that at any time when we have to use our firearm for self-defense in any fashion, but especially when it comes to road rage in that situation, it's because of a heightened emotional state, right? Something happened, you're very upset, and someone else is very upset, so you take it out. Mark, I'll tell you my road rage story. The wife and I, we were in the car. This was in Colorado Springs years back, and someone cut us off. Yeah, Mrs. Voice of Reason. She was, yeah, her and I were sitting there in the car. We were so angry. I meant to give the individual the bird, but I was so angry I wasn't thinking straight. I gave him a thumbs up instead. And
Well,
yeah, that was,
okay, hold on a second here. Look, I think we've all been there. Let's just be honest, ladies and gentlemen. We've all been there. I mean, I found myself yelling at some idiot that pulled in front of me yesterday, going 55 miles an hour. The vehicle hesitated. There was nobody behind me. There was a lot of traffic in front of me. And this person couldn't wait until the last car, which was me, passed them.
Yes.
Before they cut in front of me. And the only thing, and I won't want to say it saved them from getting that reaction, was the handicap sticker and the blue hair in front. Okay?
That explains it.
Yeah,
That
well,
explains it.
that explained it for me because I have 86 and 85-year-old parents. But at that point, it becomes, should you even be driving? All right?
Right.
Had that not been me, it could have been somebody else that winds up tailgating that person and just getting so enraged, having a bad day, whatever it is. For whatever reason, we changed behind the wheel of a car. I say we because we've all been there. And like you just said, you admittedly, meant to throw the bird, okay? And gave a thumbs up.
And I gave him a thumbs up instead. So they were just like, oh, hey, he's happy with us. But nonetheless,
well, you de-escalated the situation maybe without even realizing it at that time, okay? But that's exactly what happened. That is what happened.
And that's it.
Guys, you got to check your ego and your attitude sometimes. It's kind of like shopping over the holidays, man. You just know it's going to be a zoo. Check your attitude when you go out. It's that simple. But road rages are very, very, very dangerous, and they can unfold literally in the blink of an eye. I've had it happen before where I had somebody up my tail, have no idea. I got on, never left a lane, and got off at the next exit, coming home from a Costco. One exit down. I have no idea. Never cut in front of anybody, but whatever I did pissed off somebody. I have no earthly idea. Fortunately, I had a much faster
the
car
entire
and I left
day.
him in the dust and had fun doing it.
Yeah, and look, everybody has bad days. Something's on their mind. They went through a breakup. Their spouse is in the hospital. Whatever the case is, I mean, people are very emotional. This goes back to, again, the responsible gun ownership that we have and why this does happen in a moment's notice, because most of the time, again, if you are well trained and well cooped with your firearm to know how to handle it and what to do in those scenarios, that the emotion goes out the window, because then you're thinking logically, right? You're surveying the situation, you're escalate everything. You're already in that mindset. So God forbid, if a road rage situation gets to that level, then you're going to be the calm, collected, level-headed one that's going to be able to de-escalate because you have that firearm while someone else is raging and hopefully doesn't pull out a baseball bat, vandalizing your car or something. And that's when, we start de-escalating the situation. But again, more people need it. It's almost like self-defense with, karate or with some type of martial arts, because you learn how to control your emotions. You learn how to de-escalate, and you learn how to stop an incident from happening without it turning into a full-out brawl or hurting somebody, because we're more calm and collected. Firearm training and firearm self-defense is the exact same thing, because we got to learn how to do that ourselves.
Yeah, here's a general rule of thumb. If somebody's driving down the road, don't get yourself in a drive-by firing back and forth. Your best reaction to that,
give them the thumbs up.
Give them a thumbs up, slow down, get off the exit, get away from him. If you can avoid the situation at all costs. Sometimes it's not possible. And if it's not possible and someone gets out of their car and approaches you, I can only tell you how I'm going to act if I can't get it out of the way. And I was ready to do it when I pointed my gun at two people. If they had continued, I would have unloaded on them. You have a right to defend your life, ladies and gentlemen. Sometimes you're not given a choice because of someone else's actions. And in that case, shoot to win. It's that simple. Andy Hoosier, the voice of reason. I love you, brother. Thanks for being here on a holiday weekend, man.
Love you, man.
All right, thanks for tuning in with us. I do appreciate it. Memorial Day to you too. Enjoy the time with your family. When we come back, 4 Boxes Diner attorney, Mark Smith. You don't want to miss this. We'll be back at the flip side 6 minutes after.
You've just filled your prescription for freedom with Mark Walters, presented by X Insurance. X Insurance on the Armed American Radio Network.
All right, guys, thanks for putting up with us in the first hour, those of you who are watching. And if you're currently watching right now, it looks like everything's good. We've gotten thumbs up from from the guys in the Telegram chat who give us that information. There are spotters out there on the streets, man, and we appreciate it very much. Thank you guys for helping us out. We do appreciate it. It's not something we would find out until after the fact, okay? I see we still have a little bit of camera issues that, fade out and stuff like that, but that's okay. In the meantime, that's just tweaks here and there, and we'll let the producers and the staff do that, all that good stuff, but we're with you. And please go out of your way. Visit all of our partners. You can find them all at armedamericanradio.com. As I mentioned, Heaven's Harvest has got that 40% off. Take advantage of that, guys. That's the biggest discount I've seen Clayton Llewellyn and his family offer since we've been working with them, and you will feel better knowing you have it. The food is great. It's cheap. I think for $185, take 40% off of that pack for that food supply, 30 days. Man, I'm telling you, you're well fed. That's a great bargain. HeavensHarvest.com. HeavensHarvest.com. Also, MyPillow. Support Mike. All those great deals. I don't care where you see them. Make sure to support them. MyPillow.com. Use the promo code AAR. Patriots Relief. Need the painkiller stuff? I see a lot of you are buying that stuff. It works for me. I use it every single day. Every single day. And those of you who play a stringed instrument, I've been playing guitar like every day for the last couple of years. And my wrist is beginning to hurt a little bit on my left hand, and the stuff works wonders. Within 60 minutes, within 60 seconds, that stuff starts to go away, and I don't have to worry about it until the next day. Seems to hit me every morning when I wake up. That could be an age thing, but nonetheless, Patriots Relief is there to cover you up, and all you have to do again is use that promo code, and you get a healthy discount over there as well. EmersonKnives.com. Ernie Emerson and the family. Megan and the entire family building these amazing knives. You get 10% off with the AAR promo code. Barrel Buddy. We have a promo code, but don't know what the discount is yet. I'll let you know that coming up probably Tuesday this week. We've been in conversation with them about that. We're going to add a promo code for you at barrelbuddy.com. Barrelbuddy.com. And don't forget, Attorneys on Retainer. Attorneys on Retainer, our newest sponsor. Amazing group of people. Over the years, I've had so many people ask, do you have an attorney on retainer? I carry a gun. Should I have something like that? A lot of people like to say that because they think it's cool. Oh, I got an attorney on retainer. Look, guys, attorneys are very expensive. And if you get yourself involved in a self-defense case, it can cost you not just tens of thousands of dollars, but hundreds of thousands of dollars. It can take you to the poorhouse. And trust me when I tell you, an attorney's going to have no problem collecting a fee by putting a lien on your property. All right? Solve the problem in advance. Attorneys on Retainer is a self-defense firm, period. That's all they do. All 50 states. God forbid you have to use a firearm or any weapon for that matter. They also cover you for red flags, anything else. Make sure to check them out. All the information is at Attorneys on Retainer. The promo code is AAR. You'll get $35 off when you sign up on the fee over there. I just got a family plan, and I got $100 off using the fee just like you guys do on the family plan. You can do the same thing. And guess what? I've got an attorney right now if I need one. God forbid. I make one phone call and they're all over it. And they see it through to the end because they are your attorneys. Literally your attorneys. And you know what that means? That means attorney-client privilege instantly. They got your back. Great, great folks over there. As I said, on June 5th, I'll be over there broadcasting from 980 The Patriot, Salem's great station in downtown Phoenix, with those guys for the Daily Show. You'll be able to hear that live on June 5th, 1 to 2 p.m. Pacific time, 4 to 5 p.m. Eastern time. Guys, we'll be right back after the break here in about 5 minutes. Thanks for tuning in with us on a Memorial Day. Mark Smith, famed 2A scholar and attorney, constitutional attorney, will be here. And man, this is going to be a fascinating conversation. We're going to be talking about the Peterson case, the suppressor issue, and the new DOJ motion. Oh, man. There's so much disconnect with this thing. It's great, but it reads like it's not. Mark is going to break it down. And if you don't subscribe, make sure you do over at Four Boxes Diner. Four Boxes Diner. Mark Smith is fantastic, and he's got a video out on this yesterday and another one out today, just a few hours before we went to airtime. We'll be talking with Mark about all of that. There is a lot going on with that, and you need to know what's happening and what Trump's DOJ is doing and how they're responding to this case, because it impacts all of us going down the road forward in 2A issues. We'll be back about 5 minutes, maybe 4 minutes. So we'll see you on the flip side here in just a few minutes.
This is Armed American Radio.
If they want to take my guns, they're going to have to bring a station wagon and a whole lot of friends, because I'm not giving them anything.
From the Car Firearms Group studio at the Patriot Mobile Communication Center on the Sig Sauer Platinum microphone. Here is your host of Armed American Radio, the loudest conservative voice in America fighting for your rights, Mark Walters.
And here we go, ladies and gentlemen. Hour 2 of Armed American Radio's Monster Cast in the Car Firearms Group studios, busting out on hundreds of radio stations around the nation today, begins right now. If you're rejoining, welcome back. If you're just joining, welcome to the program. I am Mark Walters, filling your prescription for freedom here every day in the Car Firearms Group studios in front of this powerful Sig Sauer microphone, and it's all coming to you from the Patriot Mobile Communication and Command Center. Greg in Dallas, Texas, how you doing today, brother? Welcome in for the second hour of the broadcast.
Yeah, second hour got here quick. Andy helped you get that first hour on through.
Yeah, I'm going to tell you what, we talk to Andy on Mondays. We're not going to talk to him Monday because, like everybody else, we'll be taking the day off. Guys, just to throw the disclaimer out, we will be running an encore for you on Monday, and in the third hour of this program, we gave the Roundtable crew the day off, so we're going to be rerunning our interview with Doug Hamlin from the National Rifle Association, which was a great interview. You don't want to miss that. And we are up on all social media except Facebook. And Greg, if you'll tell people where to watch us on X and all that fun stuff, we'll get cracking because this hour is going to be a good one.
Yeah, absolutely. If you want to watch the show, just head on over to YouTube or Rumble and search for Armed American Radio with Mark Walters. Over on X, it's at AAR Mark. You can also head on over to armedamericanradio.org or .com, click the menu icon, and select your listen live, watch live, and podcast options. And if you want to join our live chat, download the Telegram messaging app, create your profile, and search for Armed American Radio Conversations.
That'll do it. Thank you, Greg. Appreciate it. Ladies and gentlemen, if you have not been following the Peterson case out of the Fifth Circuit, and we talked about this last week on the program, and I've been watching Mark Smith at Four Boxes Diner, and I would highly recommend that you do the same thing. If you do not subscribe to Mark over at YouTube channel, you can catch him on Rumble as well. Four Boxes Diner, you are doing yourself a disservice. Mark Smith, welcome in, my brother. It's great to have you here. I get to introduce you at GRPC every year, and now I get to introduce you on Armed American Radio. How you doing, man?
Always fun.
Oh, it is always fun. You know, we got another GRPC coming up in September, and I hate to tell you this, Mark, but it's going to happen just like that. It's going to be here. It's right around.
I know.
the corner, right? It never. It's
I know. I can't believe how fast everything's going by. And but on the good news front, this year it's going to be exciting because we're on the offense. We got good things going on in the course. We got President Trump, in the White House. We've got some good stuff going on in Congress involving our gun rights. And unlike last year, where we had Joe Biden, maybe the prospect of a Kamala Harris presidency. So we should be much more optimistic in this fall.
Metaphorically speaking, what kind of bullet did we dodge in November with that one, Mark?
Oh, it was huge. It was huge because obviously judges play a huge role in our Second Amendment rights, and Joe Biden / Kamala Harris / Chuck Schumer were doing everything they could to fill the courts up with judicial activists that 100% would be against our right to keep and bear arms, among other things. And, of course, as I've talked in other contexts, Mark, you have an open border. You're importing all these people who have no exposure to private gun ownership. And I tell people, the United States is not a gun culture. It's wrong to say we're a gun culture. What we really are in the United States is we're a privately gun-owned, self-defense-oriented gun culture. It's a particular type of gun culture. It's not hunting. It's not sporting clays. It is self-defense-oriented private gun ownership. And when you import tens of millions of people from places around this globe whose only experience with firearms is the guns are in the hands of the corrupt government or in the cartels, they have a much different view on the role of guns in life. And, you're going to change the electorate in a bad way for the Second Amendment. So shutting down the border is a big win for the Second Amendment, although it's not obvious.
Yeah, well, it's going to become more obvious, I think, over the next few years. That's going to play itself out, and I agree with you 100%. Mark, I've got so much to talk with you about on this suppressor case, this Peterson case. So what I'd like to do, I'd like to start out, if you would give us the background as to how we got to this DOJ motion and this apparent change from the DOJ from the previous administration that was fighting this case in the Fifth Circuit. Now, if you could just give us that lowdown, how did we get here? Then I want to go through a part of that motion and start breaking it down, much like you did on Four Boxes Diner, expertly, by the way. So tell us, how did we get here? Tell us the background of this case real quick.
Well, the original background, if you want to go all the way back to the 1930s, is the election of Franklin Delano Roosevelt as president, who did not like guns. His attorney general hated guns, and they created this National Firearms Act, and they slipped in suppressors/silencers to be a firearm with no legislative history, no discussion. If you look at the congressional record back in the 30s, even the experts on the National Firearms Act can't quite figure out why they put silencers/suppressors in to the National Firearms Act. So it goes all the way back to that. Now, the way we got here is this. George Peterson was indicted in Louisiana, I believe, for possessing a suppressor that had not been registered under the NFA, had not been, tax had not been paid, and he pled guilty, but he reserved his right to challenge the National Firearms Act as applied to suppressors under the Second Amendment, and that was fine. So he took that appeal all the way up to the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit, arguing that suppressors are arms under the text of the Second Amendment. The right of the people to keep their arms shall not be infringed. Suppressor is an arm. This is a regulation, obviously, on arms, because if you tax it or force it to be registered, force people to get fingerprints, that's a regulation. You're infringing on that right. And he argued that to the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit. A three-judge panel ruled against Mr. Peterson, claiming that suppressors are not even arms. At the textual level, they said, no, this is not an arm. And their rationale was absurd. It was so absurd, they literally said that if you look at a suppressor, it cannot be used offensively or defensively standing alone. But, of course, that's not how you assess so-called accessories when it comes to firearms. You always ask, well, does this play a role in helping the firearm do its job? Obviously, suppressors plays a big role in the effective and useful and safe use of firearms. It protects the hearing of the user. It protects the hearing of the people around, and so on and so on. So basically, the three-judge panel of the Fifth Circuit down there in Texas and Louisiana totally bollocks this up. This immediately caused an outcry in social media, including on the Four Boxes Diner. Someone, shocked of all shocks, in the Trump administration, because now remember, this had all been argued during the Joe Biden years.
Right.
But then this decision came out saying suppressors were not arms, using all the arguments from the Biden lawyers. But at this moment in time, the Trump administration had just come into office, and they took a look at this, probably at the urging of people they'd seen on social media, took another look at this and realized that there's a terrible mistake that was made by that three-judge panel. So Mr. Peterson's lawyers filed a motion to have this case reheard en banc by the entire U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit, saying that these three judges messed this up big time. It needs to be fixed. The Fifth Circuit, it knows the Second Amendment law quite well. We're asking for a rehearing en banc. At this point, the Trump administration was well aware of this case, and they basically submitted a document that says, look, we need some time to assess this because President Trump has directed us with an executive order to reassess all litigations in America that touch his fingers with guns to see if we're doing something wrong, if the Biden people were doing something wrong. And then there was a couple months that passed, and just on Friday, Mark, the big event occurred, which is finally the Trump administration submitted their official position on the Second Amendment in the Peterson case, and they made major concessions in favor of the right to keep and bear arms of the sort we have never seen, frankly, in modern American history from an administration, from a White House, from a Department of Justice in favor of the right to keep and bear arms. It was just a spectacular document. There's a few little curveballs there we can get to. The bottom line is this is a sea change in terms of what's going on with the way the president, the administration, the Department of Justice views the right to keep and bear arms in an extremely positive way when it comes to our Second Amendment rights moving forward.
Yeah, and it's interesting, too, Mark, because as you well know, and ladies and gentlemen, if you've listened to this program at any length over the last 17 years that we've been on the airwaves, the Fifth Circuit is usually very strong on Second Amendment issues. Were you surprised to see this three-judge panel come back?
Yeah, I think it was sloppy. I don't know. Some people do make mistakes. People do screw stuff up, and whatever it was, this three-judge panel just got it wrong. Now, I'm going to play a little bit of a devil's advocate here and give them a little bit of a defense. Sometimes judges get really busy with a bunch of different cases in different areas of law, and suppressors covered by the Second Amendment is something that if you're not familiar with the Second Amendment, really you don't spend a lot of time thinking about it. You could make some analytical mistakes because it's not something you see every day.
Right.
So my defense of how they made this mistake. I'm not defending their ultimate decision. I'm defending how they made the mistake was, a lack of familiarity with firearms, a lack of familiarity with suppressors and Second Amendment jurisprudence. Something like this, I could see something going off the rails by mistake. But the good news is, I think it's going to get fixed by the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit, either by the panel rehearing this or by the entire Fifth Circuit. But I think it's going to get fixed.
I hope you're right. And there's a lot of disconnect in this, and we're going to cover a lot of that, because when I look at this in my simple mind, I see what the government is saying, and then I wonder, why are they writing what they're writing? And you have responses. Ladies and gentlemen, you'll figure this out as we continue this fascinating conversation with 2A scholar, constitutional attorney Mark Smith from the Four Boxes Diner. Back right after the break.
Wind them up, let them go.
Guys, what you're getting ready to hear is going to be fascinating, and there's a lot of disconnect here. And part of what I'm going to read to you is going to make it sound like the government is talking out one side of their mouth, out of both sides of their mouths, to be honest with you. And Mark will break it down, and he has a great explanation as to why the government is doing what they're doing. Because in this brief, they tell us that suppressors are arms. That's the position of the administration. That's the position of the U.S. government. And that banning them would be unconstitutional, meaning suppressors. Of course, we all know that there's, in the reconciliation bill, a move to get rid of, it's in the bill right now, to get rid of suppressors on the National Firearms Act and eliminate the tax stamp. So keep that in mind when you hear what they said in this brief, because there's huge disconnect here, and you're going to wonder, why are they doing this? Mark will explain it to you and give you his theory, and then I have a much simpler theory, and I'll bounce that off Mark and see what he thinks. It's going to be a fun conversation. Don't miss it. I'll be right back at you in about 2 minutes.
This segment of Armed American Radio is being brought to you by Mike Lindell and MyPillow. Don't forget to use the promo code AAR at MyPillow.com. Welcome back.
Yeah, make sure to use those promo codes and pick that stuff up. 17 years. Mike's been with us at least 12 or 13 of those years. Support him for supporting your right to bear arms and all of our great partners. You can find them all at ArmedAmericanRadio.com. Stack your ammo at AmmoSquared.com. Clean your guns with Barrel Buddies. Get yourself a self-defense attorney on retainer at attorneysonretainer.com. You can reach all of them at ArmedAmericanRadio.com. Let's go back to Mark Smith, 2A scholar and constitutional attorney. And, of course, you know him from the Four Boxes Diner. If you do not subscribe to him, you are doing yourself a grave disservice. Subscribe to the Four Boxes Diner, ladies and gentlemen. I'm telling you right now, it is a staple for research on this program. Mark Smith, welcome back. So I'm going to take a couple screenshots from, and you have two videos out, one just earlier, not long ago before the show aired, and one from yesterday referencing this case and this apparent disconnect, and you give some great explanation. So there are four things basically that you pointed out that were great for the Second Amendment. Here's one. As explained more than in its supplemental response, the government's view is that the Second Amendment protects firearm accessories and components such as suppressors. As a result, restrictions on the possession of suppressors burden the right to bear arms, and a ban on the possession of suppressors or other similar accessories would be unconstitutional. Great news, right?
Fantastic news, because remember, when we talk about accessories, the truth is the way you assess it as a constitutional attorney is you ban or restrict, let's say, a suppressor. What have you really done? You got to think about this for a moment, Mark, right? What you've done is you've either banned or restricted a firearm capable of firing suppressed rounds. Likewise, if you ban or restrict a magazine that holds more than 10 rounds, what have you done? You've actually banned or restricted a type of firearm, an entire category of firearm, i.e. a category of firearm that is capable of firing more than 10 rounds without having to be manually reloaded. The fact that the Department of Justice under Donald Trump has taken the position that accessories such as suppressors are protected arms for the reasons I just articulated means that they're also taking the position, logically, that things like magazines, scopes, sights, red dots are also going to be protected. Now, the reason why that's so important, just to remember, just to remind the listeners here, the viewers, the text of the Second Amendment reads, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Once the text is implicated by a modern-day gun control law, the presumption is in a court that modern-day gun control restriction, that law, that tax, whatever it is unconstitutional. That is the presumption. And the only way that law can be saved legally is if the government can come forth with a massive amount of historical evidence to show that the restriction that's occurring today is somehow sufficiently analogous to a restriction that occurred in 1791 at the time of our founding when the Second Amendment was adopted. So the fact is that suppressors, red dots, magazines are basically now viewed as textually arms, means that any restriction in the United States that deals with these issues is essentially satisfying the textual element of that test. And because of that, Mark, it means that the burden of proof now is going to shift in all those cases to the government to justify it using history, and that's going to be very difficult to do. So this is a sea change, because up till now, the federal government has not sort of taken that broad definition of what is an arm to include suppressors, magazines, so-called accessories, and now they just have. That is a big deal because, again, once that text is implicated, the burden shifts to the government, and now the government has to come forth with historical evidence, and that's not that easy because there was not a lot of gun control law in 1791.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, I want you to lock in what you just heard from Mark, and that is, of course, life in a post-Bruen environment. That's where we got that from. That's where Mark went. Now, let me move to the next one. So, too, in the Second Amendment context, the right to keep arms necessarily involves the right to purchase them, to keep them in a state of efficiency for use, and to purchase and provide ammunition suitable for such arms, and to keep them in repair. Although none of these activities literally involves the keeping of arms, each activity is a fundamental component of the right protected by the Second Amendment. See United States v. Miller, going back to 1939. The possession of arms also implied the possession of ammunition. Mark, take that one.
Again, this is more fantastic news because one of the things we've seen across the country is that judges that don't like guns are taking the position that, hey, if you read the text of the Second Amendment, it says you have the right to keep, which means to possess, the right to bear, which means to carry. It doesn't talk about the right to acquire guns. It doesn't talk about the right to make a gun. It doesn't talk about the right to buy a gun or ammunition. Here, the Department of Justice is saying, no, obviously, anything that's a necessary implication to the text of the Second Amendment, you can't possess a firearm, you can't carry a firearm unless you first and foremost acquire it, obviously. And here, the Department of Justice is saying exactly that the right to acquire a gun, the right to buy a gun, is part of the text of the Second Amendment. And again, the reason why it's so important is once the modern-day gun control law is implicated by the text of the Second Amendment, the presumption is that modern-day gun control law is unconstitutional. And the Department of Justice just said we have a right to acquire guns. And why is that super important, Mark? For example, there's a major case in Delaware right now that we've been doing quite well on and winning, whether or not you have a fundamental Second Amendment right to make your own firearms. And that is a big deal. And the Department of Justice has just given us a big leg up on that argument.
Yeah, that's huge. Moving on, because of time, ladies and gentlemen, the right to bear arms. And again, more positives here. The right to bear arms similarly implies the learning to handle and use them in a way that makes those who keep them ready for their efficient use. That's coming from District of Columbia v. Heller, ladies and gentlemen. You might remember quoting Thomas Cooley, Treatise on Constitutional Limitations in 1868. So, Mark, now we're talking about training with our firearms being protected.
Exactly right. And this is super important for many reasons. First of all, you do see across the country, especially in sort of the anti-gun blue areas, Mark, attempts to try to restrict gun ranges and the ability to train with your firearm in various ways. That does implicate the Second Amendment if you assume the right to keep and bear arms implies or has as part of the text the right to train. And now the Department of Justice is absolutely, you have a right to train because, again, if you think about it, the role of the armed citizenry is to be available to step up and serve in the militia if we need it, and you need to be able to train. Relatedly, there's these anti-militia laws that are trying to pop up to say you can't, Mark and Mark cannot get together and train together because we become a militia. But again, as I like to tell everyone on my channel, if you have a right to pray by yourself, you have a right to pray with others. If you have a right to write a letter to the congressman and petition the government to change the law, you have a right to do that with others. If you have a right to train with firearms by yourself, you have a right to train with firearms with the others. And any of these anti-militia laws being bandied about by the anti-gunners that hate guns and hate any sort of self-defense, this concept articulated by the Department of Justice that we have a right to train will be extremely helpful in those kinds of challenges as well.
Absolutely. And they're out there, ladies and gentlemen. You've heard me say many, many times, if you live behind the blue wall, post-November 5th, they're coming after you, and this is just another way they do it. Moving on. Suppressors appear to improve accuracy and aid in target reacquisition by reducing recoil and muzzle rise, and suppressors aid in target shooting and activity protected, as you just heard Mark say, by the Second Amendment by reducing noise pollution and providing additional hearing protection beyond personal protective equipment. All these practical benefits demonstrate that suppressors facilitate the constitutional right to keep and bear arms. Mark, I'll let you go to that one. I would have to cut you off because we're getting ready to take a break. Ladies and gentlemen, when we come back, I'll repeat that. Then we'll move to one other great thing that happened in this brief, but then I'm going to pull out some disconnect here from the government's own words in the same brief from all this great stuff you're hearing, and we'll break it down, and we'll let Mark break it down for you in ways that will hopefully make sense to you, because I'm going to be honest with you. When I look at it, I think, okay, my disconnect spidey senses are going off. Mark's going to try to fix me, and you if you're concerned. We'll be right back. Don't go away.
a long break.
Daniel Defense firearms are guaranteed for life, trusted worldwide, and designed, engineered, and manufactured right here in America. Daniel Defense, freedom, passion, precision.
Yeah, Daniel Defense is freedom, passion, precision, ladies and gentlemen. Make sure to check them out at DanielDefense.com, DanielDefense.com. I've been to that facility many times. You can smell the freedom just oozing when you open the door. You can also visit the Double D Foundation while you're there and support the youth shooting sports that Marty and Cindy Daniel have put so much effort into and are doing remarkable things with. These are the kids coming up behind us, folks. Okay? So if you can toss them $5, couch change, just dig into the couch. Support them. And all of our great partners. You can find them all at armedamericanradio.com. Let's go back to Four Boxes Diners. Mark Smith. Mark, welcome back. Let's continue here. Let me pull that quote back up and read that out loud again. Yeah, pull it up. Where are you? Now I'm going to move on to this one because time is going to get us. As discussed above, history and tradition permit Congress to impose modest regulations on suppressors. The National Firearms Act does not prohibit possession of suppressors. It requires only registration, a background check, and a $200 tax that is not indexed to inflation. So here's where the disconnect starts to come in, Mark. Suppressors are arms. They can't be banned. But the National Firearms Act does not prohibit possession. It only requires a background check, and they refer to it as modest, and a $200 tax that is not indexed to inflation. Tell that modest number to somebody in the 1930s when the $200 was about $3,600 to $3,800. Now, it hasn't been indexed to inflation, but nonetheless, it's there. So we start to see this shift in this brief here, and that's where my disconnect spidey senses start going off, Mark, and that's what I want to talk about for the next couple of segments, because this seems not to make sense to me when the rest of this brief appears to be in support of regulating suppressors that they've just told us are arms that are protected by the Second Amendment. Can you shake this down for me?
Yeah, I really can. It's quite straightforward. The Peterson case involves George Peterson, a individual defendant. This is not like a lawsuit brought by, the Second Amendment Foundation or someone like that, where you have a bunch of members. Okay, now the reason why this is important is this. As I explained on the Four Boxes Diners channel, Mark, I'm sure you've heard me say this. Every legal case, every precedent that's on the books is a brick in the wall, either for the Second Amendment or against the Second Amendment. We want good precedents on the books. We want to get rid of any bad precedents that the anti-gunners cannot use. Now, as we sit here right now on Memorial Day weekend, Mark, that three-judge panel decision that I explained earlier was terrible in the Peterson case, that is on the books today. An anti-gun judge in New York or California tomorrow could cite in that three-judge panel decision in Peterson and use it against the Second Amendment. So how do you fix that if you're the Trump administration? The answer is what they did in this brief, in my view. You make all these concessions that basically move the ball to the 5-yard line of your opponents, and then you got to stop. And why do you have to stop? Because if the Trump administration said in this brief that everything that George Peterson said is correct, and that all this stuff is completely protected by the Second Amendment, and that the National Firearms Act is no good, guess what happens? What happens is this case becomes a moot case. And under Article 3 of the U.S. Constitution, the case has to be dismissed because under Article 3 of the Constitution, a federal court, such as the Fifth Circuit, can only hear cases and make decisions in cases where there's an actual case in controversy. If the Trump administration basically rolls over and says, we agree entirely with Mr. Peterson, the case should be dismissed, and Mr. Peterson should get out of prison, or he's not in prison, I don't believe, but his conviction should be undone. Well, guess what? There will not be an opportunity in the court to overturn that terrible precedent, which we expect to happen. So the right way of doing it is you get the ball to the 5-yard line with all these great concessions in support of the Second Amendment, and then you pause, and then you make a series of very weak, half-hearted arguments, just mouthing the words, but nevertheless, we think the taxation scheme and the registration scheme of the NFA are constitutional under the Second Amendment. You mouth those words, you put up some arguments that are pretty weak tea, which is basically how I'm interpreting this part of the brief by the Department of Justice here, and that forces the Fifth Circuit to assess the case, and presumably they will hear this case en banc or otherwise, and basically say, well, these arguments by the Department of Justice are terrible, and we're going to rule that the Second Amendment prevents this registration requirement and taxation requirement as applied to suppressors. But again, if the Trump administration had gone the whole way and this case got dismissed, that 3-judge panel decision against the Second Amendment would be on the books, and we would not want that.
Could they not have worded this differently? Again, why don't they just say that?
Oh, because you have to look. You have to maintain a controversy in court, or the case is thrown out for lack of a jurisdiction. So, by arguing, even albeit half-heartedly, in my opinion, by arguing that suppressors can be regulated under the National Firearms Act, you are allowing the federal courts to continue to have jurisdiction, which gives the courts the opportunity to overturn that 3-judge precedent. Now, this is not unusual. This is something I think we learned from the liberals. If you go back to the gay marriage fight, okay, there was the Defense of Gay Marriage, the Defense of Marriage Act, DOMA, that says that marriage is a federal law that says a marriage is between a man and a woman. Remember those days? Okay, the Obama administration inherited that law, and they were coincidentally down the Fifth Circuit too, I believe. They basically said that we're going to continue to enforce that law against gay couples that are not married, but we think it's wrong. So that's kind of the way. The reason why they said we're going to continue to enforce this law against gay couples that are not married is because they needed to make sure that the federal courts had standing to decide the case in favor of gay couples. So even the Obama administration understood that you have to make sure you keep jurisdiction in these courts if you want to change the law and get good precedents. And I think that's what's happening here with the Trump administration, because the arguments they're making about why suppressors are arms, but then you get to register them and or tax them are border. I don't, like I said, they passed the smell test, but just barely.
Yeah, boy, I tell you.
And I don't see them winning. They're going to lose, in my view. They're going to lose these arguments. They're just kind of weak tea arguments, but they're just good enough to keep the court case in the courts, to maintain standing, to maintain a live controversy, but they're pretty weak tea stuff, in my view.
So they know that. They know that going in.
Well, I don't know for sure they know that, but I have a feeling these lawyers at DOJ now, especially in leadership, are pretty sharp. So I don't know if they know. I have a feeling that they understand what they're doing, and they learned from Obama, is my guess.
I hope you're right on that, because as I read through the rest of this, I kind of shake my head. And I can go, the Act's restrictions on suppressors also resemble historical laws in how they burden the right to bear arms. Now, they quote Rahimi in here about, 3 or 4 times, I believe, the recent Rahimi case.
Look, there's no chance, in my view, that these can prevail, because, first of all, they make this argument that says, well, suppressors, you can have a modest $200 tax. The U.S. Supreme Court in 1963, I believe, in Harper versus Board of Elections, Mark, struck down a $1.50 poll tax that was a targeted tax on a constitutional right. They've just conceded in this brief that suppressors are arms, and that a restriction on arms, i.e. suppressors, is a restriction on the Second Amendment. That means if you have a targeted tax of $200 on suppressors, you are exactly the same precedent that was already been struck down in the 1960s in the Harper case by the Supreme Court. So, yeah, I think that's like an obvious one, and there's other things as well. And then in terms of the registration, meaning you can have arms registrations in the United States. Brett Kavanaugh, when he was the judge on the D.C. Court of Appeals, who's kind of, I would view, the middle of the Supreme Court in terms of ideology and whatnot, Brett Kavanaugh has already said that gun registries are unconstitutional under the Second Amendment in Heller 2 in 2011 when he was on the D.C. Court of Appeals, saying there is no historical basis for gun registries. The only thing that comes close to it is that when you showed up for militia duty in the 18th century, you had to prove that you brought the firearms you were required to bring under the Militia Act of 1792, but that has nothing to do with coming up with a list of all the guns you have
30.
at home. So even Justice, but then Judge Kavanaugh said this is no-go zone, and I'm highly confident the Department of Justice is aware of this kind of precedent, because you kind of know what justices have done in the past, and everyone knows what then Judge Brett Kavanaugh had to say about the Second Amendment. I think that was a big reason why he became Justice Brett Kavanaugh, because of that Heller 2 dissent in favor of the Second Amendment.
Yeah, I hope you're right, because you probably are. But again, the disconnect to me here, it's almost like they're baiting. Hearing you say this is almost like they're baiting something here. Ladies and gentlemen, we're taking our final break. Mark Smith will return for one more segment, and we'll wrap this up. And I got a few things I want to get to, probably won't. As you know, if you've been listening to the show for all these years, Time gets away from us, but we'll do the best we can to cram it in. I hope you're enjoying the interview as much as I'm enjoying bringing it to you. We'll be back with Four Boxes Diners, Mark Smith, right after this. Don't go away.
The following segment of Armed American Radio is being brought to you by Patriot Mobile. Visit patriotmobile.com/AAR and use the AAR promo code to get free activation today. Welcome back.
Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, you can do that. If you're watching, the phone that I'm holding up is a Patriot Mobile activated device. You can do the same thing at patriotmobile.com. Use that AAR promo code and get a month for free. You can find all of our great partners at armedamericanradio.com. Please support them all. It's what brings this voice to the nation's airwaves every single day, 6 days a week now in our 17th year. It's been a remarkable run, and we need your help to do it. We've had your help for years. We need you to keep supporting the program and supporting our partners. That's how you do it. We scratch each other's backs here. That's why we do this every single day. So thank you for that support, and thanks to all of our affiliates around the nation. It's great. We just keep growing and adding new stations almost monthly. So, guys, we couldn't do it without them. ArmedAmericanRadio.com. Click on the sponsor page. Boom. Just click on one of the links. They're all live. Attorneys on retainer. Get yourself a self-defense attorney. Save that. Use that AAR promo code, and you get the discount on your sign-up over there. I did it. My family is protected. We have attorneys on retainer. You know the routine. ArmedAmericanRadio.com. And thank you for all that support. We have a huge announcement coming up on the 1st. We'll make that announcement on the 1st. Not until then. I've had a number of emails. What are you talking about? No, you'll find out on the 1st. But another great partnership that's formed. Mark Smith, Four Boxes Diner, 2A scholar and Second Amendment constitutional attorney. Mark, welcome back. You know, I as I read through this, I kept thinking to myself as I continued reading this, Mark, wow, it's like they're baiting some of those. Like they're not saying the quiet part out loud. They're just kind of alluding to it. While a complete ban on suppressors would be unconstitutional, the Act's restrictions comply with the Second Amendment. In a same brief that also said suppressors are arms protected by the Second Amendment, but it's okay to modestly do this or do that. So what are they, in the conclusion here, for the foregoing reasons, this court should grant panel rehearing and hold that the National Firearms Act's regulations on suppressors burden the right to bear arms, but that the Act's modest burden is consistent with the principles underlying the Second Amendment. So they did apparently go to great lengths to make that point. And then there's another question after you get to that. Again, try to make me feel better here if you would.
Yeah, well, I think this proves that the Trump administration is playing this game right in support of the Second Amendment, because they gave the game away there, right? If you think about it historically, you got a guy that's been convicted of a firearms law, right? He's been convicted of a firearms crime. Historically, all you'd want to do if you're the Department of Justice is win the case and keep the conviction upheld, right?
Right.
That's not what the Trump administration just did there, right? What the Trump administration is saying is, we agree that the three-judge panel screwed up the Second Amendment analysis entirely. We agree with that. We think that they should be given a chance to get it right this time. Now, if you're really the Department of Justice historically, you don't want to give anybody a second bite at the apple. You want their conviction to stand and be over. Instead, what the Trump administration is saying is they are agreeing with the lawyers for George Peterson that, yeah, this case should be reheard and reassessed. Now, why would the Department of Justice want to do that if all they want to do is win the case? Because technically they've already won the case, because they have that three-judge panel that says the National Firearms Act, as applied to suppressors, is constitutional, and Mr. Peterson's conviction can stand.
The old DOJ won the case. The old
Correct.
DOJ won the case. That's an important point. That's the old Biden DOJ.
That's right. And by the way, though, the reality is it was, whether it be the law and order conservatives under the Bush presidencies, or Clinton, or Obama, or Biden, the reality is they would all want to uphold this conviction. Is the Trump administration Department of Justice says, no, the panel screwed this up. It needs to redo this. They're basically going almost to that line of saying that we agree that Mr. Peterson's conviction should not stand. They're going right up to the line, but they're not going over it, because if they go over it, the reality is we won't be able to undo that precedent, because the case will become moot, and that's no good.
All right, that makes sense.
If you support the Second Amendment, it's no good.
Now, the Fifth Circuit, ladies and gentlemen, has always been historically supportive of our Second Amendment rights. And I loved when you pointed out on the Four Boxes Diner episode, I think it was earlier today, could have been yesterday, correct me on that one, when you said you'd love to flip the Supreme Court with the Fifth Circuit.
Correct.
Because they have been
That's
historically supportive of our Second Amendment rights. So having said that, what would you like to see happen here? The full en banc panel takes this and does what?
Well, I'd want the Fifth Circuit grants the petition for rehearing en banc, rehears this, and then issues an opinion that says suppressors are protected arms under the text of the Second Amendment. There is no historical basis for attacks on suppressors. There's no historical basis for any kind of a arms registry, including on suppressors, and that this is the NFA as applied to suppressors is entirely unconstitutional, and Mr. Peterson's conviction shall be vacated. That is the right answer, and that precedent then it can in turn be used all across the country in all sorts of Second Amendment cases by the Department of Justice and others to advance our right to keep and bear arms.
And the Trump administration is in what appears to be a convoluted way trying to get that to happen. Am I hearing you right on that?
Yes. Yes, I think
Okay.
that's exactly what's happened. That's why they've taken the ball to the 5-yard line and stopped. Because if they went any further, they'd moot the case out. And if they moot the case out, then they cannot undo that terrible 3-judge panel decision against the Second Amendment from a couple months ago that arose from the Biden years.
All right, let's take this to the reconciliation bill, where obviously passed out of the House that suppressors are protected and they're going to pull it from the NFA. How does that come into play here? Is that all a part of this?
Yes and no. Obviously, we want Congress to pull suppressors out of the National Firearms Act. That is the right answer, and they should do it for many reasons, including that, frankly, it's unconstitutional. So Congress should pull suppressors out of the NFA entirely. That is great moving forward. But, of course, a lot of people have been convicted, including Mr. Peterson, under the old laws as it used to exist. So having a prominent legal precedent that says that this NFA, as applied to suppressors, is unconstitutional would apply to previous convictions, and that, I would argue, assuming you have no violence associated with you, that would give you a basis to apply to the Department of Justice Restoration of Rights program, which I suspect is coming out soon, and you'd be able to use that to eliminate that federal conviction and get your Second Amendment rights back, among other things. So I think it all works together, but they're technically separate. We want Congress to fix the problem moving forward so we don't have to worry about court issues, and then we want this ruling from the Fifth Circuit so that we can fix past mistakes by the federal government.
So Trump administration is willing to lose this, is what it sounds like, and that's why they wrote it the way they wrote it.
Well, of course, obviously I have no secret inside knowledge about what they're thinking, but just reading this as a professional lawyer and a member of the Supreme Court bar and reading between the lines, this is exactly what I think is going on.
Yeah, I got to thinking about this as I was watching Four Boxes, and I thought, there's another analysis. Maybe those attorneys just aren't as smart as you are, Mark.
Well, that may be the case, but the concessions made at the first part of this brief are very robust in favor of the Second Amendment and would only be flagged by lawyers that are semi-sophisticated and are watching the Four Boxes Diner.
Well, I hope they are, and I hope they're as sophisticated as you believe they are, because it is kind of convoluted. But ladies and gentlemen, I'm Mark, thank you for being here to explain this. I read this stuff. I can't even tell you how many times I've read this over and over. I've got so many yellow highlights on here. We just wish we had more time with you, but nonetheless, I think we got it all out. Where can people find you? The music means we're getting ready to end this hour. I want everybody to subscribe to you at Four Boxes. Go for it.
Yep, they can just go to Four Boxes Diner on YouTube. The channel's totally free and all that, and check me out on X at Four Boxes Diner.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, guys, Mark puts the best information out there. That's why he's got hundreds of thousands of subscribers. Join him over there. I've been subscribing for the longest time. It's fantastic information. Anything you need to know about 2A, questions you have, it's there. Mark Smith, Four Boxes Diner, 2A scholar and constitutional attorney. Thank you, brother, for being here on a holiday weekend. We appreciate it. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, what's left of it. Take some time off. Try to anyway. And thanks for everything you do in support of the right to keep and bear arms. Looking forward to seeing you again in person at the GRPC coming up at the end of September. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for being here on a holiday weekend. We appreciate it very much. Please support our partners at armedamericanradio.com. Next hour is an encore. We're going to replay Doug Hamlin's interview from the National Rifle Association. Have a great weekend. Stay safe. We'll see you on the radio Tuesday.
You've just filled your prescription for freedom with Mark Walters, presented by X Insurance. X Insurance on the Armed American Radio Network.
Guys, oh man, I tell you what, if you've not read that brief, you're doing yourself a disservice. And the best way to start to understand what's happening in this, because if you read this, it's a fairly short brief, just about a dozen pages maybe. But if you read it, the government goes to great lengths to talk about how the NFA and the tax and everything is constitutional. It seems so convoluted based on what you just heard. But there's legal theory there that I'm not privy to that Mark is. And that's why I wanted to bring him here, because there's a lot of chatter on this out there on X and other social media platforms. And Mark is pretty confident in what he's talking about there. And I hope to God he's right. He usually always is. But again, we can't get in. Like you said, he doesn't have any inside information here. It's just his experience, and his experience is immense. So make sure to check out Four Boxes Diner. If you're not subscribing, please go over there. You do yourself a disservice. He has got fantastic information out there on everything you need to know, and he goes way deep into the weeds. He's been a source on this program for many, many years. Whether he's been here or not, it's his stuff that he puts out. It's just fantastic. Hey, guys, Encore coming up 6 minutes after. If you missed Doug Hamlin's interview, now's the time to catch it. We'll have everything up on podcast for you here in actually just a few minutes for the first 2 hours. The third hour will likely be up tomorrow morning. In the meantime, enjoy your Memorial Day weekend. Please stay safe out there. Remember why we have a Memorial Day weekend. Have a great time with your family. Enjoy the time off. Hopefully you have some time off. And we'll see you back live on the radio on Tuesday. We are running an encore tomorrow. Thanks, guys, for being here. We appreciate it so much. Have a great day. We'll see you live on Tuesday.